Well, welcome everybody. We are continuing the Jesus and Mental Health series, specifically today by talking about Jesus and anxiety. And I'm here with my good friend Jenelle. And Jenelle, you shared a little bit of your story with me after we introed the series. And as we talk a little bit more about it, I thought this is a story that our community so badly needs to hear. So first of all, thank you so incredibly much for being here and for courageously telling this story. And secondly, would you take a moment to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Jenelle Quinlan. I attend here at Encounter Church Kentwood with my family. I have two teenage boys. Ryan is 18 and Tyler is 16. And newlywed to Joshua. We were married this spring. And just finding a place to get settled in as a family. Just love the idea of getting plugged into the local church and into a place that cares about the community. I'm passionate about community service. I work in nonprofit world, helping in housing.
Mm-hmm. And you came up to me after we introed the series one week and said, this is a story that's really going to resonate with a lot of people. First and foremost, you and your journey with anxiety. Would you share a little bit about how God has taken you on this trip?
Looking back, I can see pieces ever since my childhood, but my first real experience with it would be postpartum after my first child. About 8 weeks in, I had my first panic attack. I had finally gotten some time away and released from all those intense pressure feelings of being a new mom. And I stood in a store frozen, just heart racing, sweating, couldn't think, couldn't move, couldn't process, and had no idea what was happening to me. Just felt like everything was overwhelming, collapsing, and made no sense because I finally had some time to myself. This was supposed to be refreshing
supposed to be a high point.
And good. But that really just started the whole postpartum journey for me. I was just trying to figure things out. I had a degree in psychology, so I thought I could fix myself. That did not work well. Had a lot of well-meaning people speak into my life that I just needed to pray more. I needed to study the word. I needed to exercise more and watch my diet and prioritize myself, which were all important things. And I did all of those things. But I didn't do all the things that I needed to do.
What else was there?
I really, for me, I needed a physical component. I needed some medication to help stabilize me. And it took me quite a while to come to the point to break down and say that I am not enough. I cannot do this alone. And it felt like defeat, that I should be able to handle this. My life is good. But the reality was I could do all the right things and still not fix all of the issues. And things have gotten better and worse, and I've gone off of medication. I've gone on medication and different ones. I've tried it with counseling and without counseling. And really, I've come to the point, how many years later now, that I've realized it's not just a biological, it's not just a mental, it's not just a counseling issue, it's not just a spiritual issue, it's all of them. And until I was willing to get help on every single part of that, I wasn't finding healing. The medicine was not enough because I didn't have the counseling component in it. All the physical things that I were doing were helpful, but without dealing with the spiritual side of it, realizing the cycles of, Satan uses this as a spiritual attack when you start to see the seasons when those things were happening. It was a multifaceted thing that I had to find freedom in every area. And most of it comes down to, it sounds ironic because it's anxiety, but it's pride.
Okay.
It's this warped self-sufficiency, that I can fix myself, that if I think through enough things that I can figure it all out.
Yeah.
A self-dependence. And that's not what God ever called us to.
Yeah.
We were never meant to be self-sufficient. We were supposed to be dependent on Him. And that there was no place in the Bible that my perfection was ever asked for.
In fact, just the opposite.
Exactly.
Right? The only thing we contribute to our salvation is our brokenness. And saying, okay, here you go, God. Can you do something with this? What can you do with this?
And that's actually where I find God working more.
Beautiful.
The more I tried to put on the mask and pretend that everything was okay, the more I fell apart. The more I fell apart, the more God put me together. I sat in a Bible study of strangers at one point, waiting to get into a doctor, and just blurted out this prayer request that I couldn't handle anymore. And this beautiful soul that I didn't know sat across the table from me and said, "Me too. That's my journey." And suddenly, like this wave of peace just washed over me.
Complete stranger.
Complete stranger. But in that room, in that moment, I was not alone.
Yes.
She understood my journey, and she had tears in her eyes, and was enough to say, "You're going to be okay."
Oh,
And
hope.
it gave me that hope to hold on, to get into the doctor's office, to get to the medication, to do the next steps. I didn't feel crazy anymore. I felt heard. And it was just this amazing connection. And God actually used that moment in that Bible study group that other people started opening up about their issues.
Yeah.
And God had gone ahead and placed in that Bible study, somebody had already been through exactly what everyone else was going through. And so there was a pair, like a mentor,
Yeah.
for each scenario. But it took us being willing to be vulnerable to say,
Yeah.
this is me.
To take those masks off
Mm-hmm.
of everything is perfect and to be open and real with one another.
Mhm.
And then God
Used
knew
it.
in that moment to remind everybody in a unique to them sort of way, you aren't alone. And there is hope.
And that was just the beginning. I find now that God uses my brokenness far more than He ever uses my talents, as far as connecting to people. And in life change scenarios, when I'm sharing Jesus, it is about my struggle that connects me to people,
Yeah.
where I say, this is where Jesus carried me. This is where I was, and here I am now because of this is what God is doing in my life. I thought God would use all the things that I did right, but it really is we're jars of clay.
Yeah.
And all those broken places where His light shines through and people can see. And when we put a facade over, that light isn't shining through anymore. So that's why I'm willing to do this here, because this is kind of crazy to tell the whole world, hi, I deal with anxiety.
Yeah.
But my hope is that somebody else feels less alone, that this creates a more normative discussion about it, that
To help
half
that.
the people in this room probably struggle with anxiety in some way or another. If we look at national statistics, in this room there's no difference. Half the people sitting in a room deal with anxiety of some form or another.
To make that experience in that Bible study normal. To say this is what we do, especially as Jesus followers. To say perfection is not the expectation, nor is it the goal, right? Openness, honesty is the goal.
And if you read Jesus's words throughout the Bible, there was never any request of that. It's for our heart. And as long as my heart is desiring this, do everything right and fix everything and control, He doesn't have my heart.
Yeah.
He has my worry. And that's not what He asked for.
That's good.
And it closes me off to all the opportunities and all the people around me as long as I try to control every situation.
That they need to hear not just your strengths, not just your perfection. They need to hear the journey along the way. They need to hear the ways that you have relied on him for every step of the way. I think of that saying that we impress people with our strengths, but we connect through our weaknesses. And that's what I hear you doing again and again. Jesus using you to connect and to provide hope for so many others. I wonder if you might take a moment and speak to somebody who's watching this right now, who's in the throes of it, you know, and they haven't had that connection yet. They haven't had that moment of knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are not alone and that there is hope. And they're wondering, what else is there? What would you want to say to them?
I guess I would start with the same words that were given to me too. You're not alone. And second of all, this is not all there is. This is just right now. This is your starting place. And there's so much more to your story. And there's so much more value to you to stay in this spot. So it takes bravery, but I know you have it in you that you can do the hard thing and tell one person. When we speak things into the light, things become less dark. And there are people in your world that care. And to find those people, find me, Pastor Dirk, or somebody else to speak those things to find that you're not alone, to find that community to help you through that. And start on that journey to find all the parts of you that need freedom. Because it's not going to be just one thing, and it's not going to be just one day. And I can't promise you that the anxiety will ever go away, but I can promise you that God will never leave you alone in it, and will not leave you in the same place that you are right now. And that what defines you now as what feels like a curse can really become your blessing in disguise, because it brings you to the place where you can decide for yourself if you truly depend on God.
That's a good word. There's resources set up ready for you at encounterchurch.org/help. Let's start that conversation today. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story.